Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our latest guest speaker event in our Rutgers Business School Masters of Science program in Digital Marketing speaker series. I am Stacy Smolin-Schwartz, if you don't know me, the founding director of the MS Digital Marketing program here at Rutgers Business School. Tonight, I am very pleased to host Stacy Taffet, who is the Marketing Senior Vice President of PepsiCo Beverages North America. She will speak about branding and storytelling in our increasingly digital world. Moderating this session tonight is one of our favorite RBS MS digital marketing instructors, Bryan Ruiz. For RBS, Bryan has taught the digital advertising and promotion elective for over the past 3 years and recently developed 2 new mini course electives for our program, Performance Marketing in a Digital World and Branding in a Digital World, which is very apropos for tonight's session. By day, though, Bryan has worked at Google for more than 10 years. He is currently a global strategy and operations team lead, but he spent 8 years in the sales organization working with clients build their brands through Google's suite of products, including YouTube and search. And when he isn't working, he is spending time with his 2 kids, his partner, and his French bulldog. Bryan, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to you to introduce our guest speaker and kick things off.
Perfect. Thanks, Stacy, and hello, everyone. Super excited. Thanks for everyone taking the time on a Monday night. Super excited to introduce Stacy and excited to have a conversation with her tonight around all things branding. A quick little intro on Stacy. She's a Senior Vice President of Marketing at PepsiCo Beverages North America. She oversees media, innovation, content, partnerships, and other marketing functions. Before this, she was the SVP of Brand Marketing for Frito-Lay, managing major snack brands like Doritos, Cheetos, Lay's, and Ruffles. And she's now been at PepsiCo for over 15 years, holding various roles, including leading the growth of the Water Plus portfolio and launching the Pure Leaf iced tea brand. She previously worked at American Express and holds an MBA from Harvard. And she also serves on the board of 2 nonprofits. I'm super excited to talk to Stacy. As the other Stacy mentioned, I've worked at Google for over 10 years and I had the opportunity to work with many global CPG companies, including PepsiCo. So excited to have that conversation. For all the students who have joined, if you want to ask any questions during the session, please feel free to add in the chat box. And I'll try and get them to them live, but if not, we can take at the end during a live Q&A. With that, I'll let Stacy say a hello, and then we'll just jump right into it. Stacy.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Bryan. I feel really bad now that I didn't mention my 2 kids and my dog in my bio. So I'll tell everyone I have 2 kids and a cute little rescue dog named Daphne. And now we can start.
I love it. See, now we're on even playing field.
Yeah.
So I know tonight's around all things branding, and we're going to talk about many things around data and technology and creative, but I wanted to root everyone in really the fundamentals of branding, right? I think, especially with global companies like PepsiCo, branding is at the core of what you guys do.
Yeah.
And I know you've been in marketing for so long, right? And while the landscape continues to change, I feel like there are just some core elements of branding that probably will never change. And so wanted to get your take on like what are some areas of branding that you think will kind of be timeless and remain regardless of all these technological advancements.
Yeah, you said timeless. I think about it as timeless stories told in a timely way. That's what I think branding is. And what I love most about, I was a psychology major in college, and the reason I got into marketing was because I just love understanding people and why people are motivated and what makes them make certain choices. And I just think that's really fascinating. And the best brands understand their consumers better than any other brand. That's how they win in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best branding and the best way to develop a brand is to start with a human insight. So something that is absolutely true, but not obvious. That's what makes a good insight. So I like to talk about insights as a sound. So when I'm talking to someone about a brand and an idea, and I say, well, what's the insight? Where's the tension? And they tell me, and you just go, uh-huh. That's not a great insight. A great insight is when you go, ah, and you immediately are like, that is so true, but something that's not obvious. So that's the start that will always be the case in branding. And then what you do with that insight is the second piece. So that is how you build this timeless narrative about what your brand is going to deliver that no other brand is going to deliver to solve that insight and that tension. So brands should be something that build mental structures and stand for something consistent over time. And then the fun part that we're going to get into is how you tell those stories in a very timely way using data technology, all the tools that we have at our fingertips now to be as relevant as possible, but always laddering up to what the brand should always stand for in that timeless way.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially with the human insight and really capitalizing on that. And when you talk about like a timeless narrative, obviously PepsiCo has this suite of brands that are just so like they've been around for so long, right? And so how does PepsiCo like ensure consistency in its brand messaging across its various products and markets?
Yeah, it's actually really hard. That's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest challenges that big companies have, and it's challenging for a couple of reasons. One, we many of you are probably start thinking about careers in marketing or starting careers in marketing. In the CPG industry in particular, we move around roles a lot. That's sort of a core part of being a brand marketer, is you spend, you know, 3 to 5 years in one role, 2 years in the next role, and so what one of the unintended consequences of that can be is that people like to reinvent things. And, that is something that happens at PepsiCo. It happens at a lot of CPG companies. And that's one of the worst things you can do is reinvent a brand every few years. So it's a challenge for that reason. The other reason it's a challenge to stay consistent is because it's very easy to want to throw away strategy when the execution doesn't work, right? So if you go through a sort of a soft time in a business, everybody looks around and says, oh my God, we have to throw everything out and start again. Well, that's not always the case, right? You have to diagnose what a problem is in a business. And, many times it's not actually about the brand positioning or the brand creative or anything like that. It could be your physical availability, your distribution, something completely different. So that's really challenging too. So what we try to do to overcome that is to create a culture and incentives that prevent those two things from standing in our way, right? So we actually reward people that come into a new role and lead a brand and build on something, on what the brand is already about, and make it stronger and nurture it. And we don't reward people from inventing everything anew just for the sake of it. So that's one. And then the second piece is we've put kind of measurement in place to be able to really diagnose what problems are. And so we can tease apart, is the brand strategy off, or is, a particular execution in the market something that isn't working? And then we course correct and we move on. But it's over time, we've learned that consistency is one of the most important things about building a successful brand.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because you talk about consistency with brands and building on that. And
Yeah.
so when we think about the differences in branding, what's the difference do you see in branding and sustaining an existing brand
Yeah.
or a new brand entering a market? And I know you have like experience with both. So like what do you see are some of the key differences there?
Yeah, it all depends on what the we say job to be done, but what the objective is for what you're trying to do. So, in business, we're trying to grow, and our job as marketers is we say we're growth architects. We're trying to figure out how to create growth in the category that we're in. So whatever category your brand is playing in, you need to understand what drives preference and choice in those categories. And so, in beverages, it is, well, first you need to be aware of the brand. But then you need to have an advantage in a couple of areas. Category relevance, which means the attributes. So for beverages, think about refreshment and going well with food and some of the core attributes about being a good beverage. That's one. The second we call situational salience, and that's being top of mind when the occasion comes to have that brand. So when you're thirsty or when you're working out, are you thinking of Gatorade? Are you thinking of what brand comes to mind? And then the third is distinction. And that's all about what we started talking about, is having a powerful brand that stands for unique things in the category that makes it stand apart from any competitor. So we know those are the things that matter. And then depending on what your job is, if it's a new brand or existing brand, you kind of diagnose, well, where do I need to course correct? Where are the problems I need to solve? And then we build our plans and our communications around those. So for a new brand, awareness is usually the first thing that has to
Yeah.
happen. And so, when you're starting something from scratch, thinking about a way that will get people to understand that you're out there, you're in the consideration set. And in a category like beverages, it's really challenging because it is such a crowded space. So how do you break through and tell people who you are and what you stand for versus an existing brand, where let's take a Pepsi, where people know what it is, but the job, might be, hey, it's not top of mind when I'm eating a hamburger. And that's a really important occasion. So I'm going to structure my communications around situational salience when it comes to food, as an example. And I actually brought an example of one new brand. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to cue it up, Bryan.
Yeah.
Did I? Yeah. So one, as we talked about, existing brands versus new brands, I mentioned awareness, and it's interesting. One of my experiences, Bryan mentioned I led our water portfolio for a few years, and part of that was launching this new brand in the sparkling water category, and it was a pretty crowded category. At PepsiCo, we had tried entering this category. And we tried 3 times. The first time we launched a brand called Aquafina Sparkling, and it failed. The second time we said, we must have done it wrong. Don't throw away the strategy. We're going to try again. Aquafina Sparkling again. And it failed. And what we learned from that experience was taking a still water brand and putting bubbles in it was actually not true to what people were drinking sparkling water for. They were actually drinking sparkling water in place of soda. And so it was more about the fun, the refreshment, the bubbles, and it needed to behave more like a soda brand. So we launched a new brand. And, at that time, we wanted to scale that business really, really quickly. And so it was important to drive massive awareness of the brand. And so this campaign I'm going to show, we decided to put it on Super Bowl and get 100 million eyeballs on it, and use a creative device that we thought would be sticky, so people would remember that the name of the brand was there, and when they thought about sparkling water, they'd think of it. So I'll show the Super Bowl bubbly ad.
Perfect.
Ooh, blackberry buble, my favorite.
You mean bubbly.
No, I mean buble.
You're Michael Bublé. That's a bubbly.
She's right, Michael Bublé. It's pronounced
Buble, I know, thanks. Dave.
Can I have your autograph, Mr. Bubbly?
It's buble. Buble? It's bubbly. Sparkling water. Crack a smile.
Michael. Don't do that.
So after the Super Bowl, awareness on bubbly was over 50% across the entire country. So that's pretty remarkable just by having a kind of sticky creative idea. And then we spent the next 3 or 4 years building on that and really reinforcing that bubbly is a sparkling water, and it was there to enter the category.
I love that. And that kind of dovetails into the next topic I wanted to cover on was all things creative and storytelling, which is at the heart of branding, right? And PepsiCo is such a great storyteller across their entire suite of brands. So as a company, how do you guys approach creative storytelling in your marketing campaigns? Like what key elements do you focus on that would resonate with a wider audience? Because I mean, in theory, you guys are going after anyone with a mouth, right? And so how do you,
For some brands,
how do you, right? How do you produce a story that is going to resonate with all different kinds of people?
Yeah. I'll go back and start with the insight again. So, obviously your brand needs to be built on some sort of universal insight, but every piece of creative needs to be there to resonate with people in their lives. And so really understanding what's going on in you have a target consumer, what's going on in that group of people's lives at the moment, what is a tension that we can solve with our brand? And that is really the basis of every good creative brief. And what is the insight? And that turns into the basis of a creative brief, which is what the marketer creates and then partners with a creative team, whether that's within the company or that's in an advertising agency, to turn that opportunity into something that's creatively interesting and special. So a piece of art at the end of the day, right? A film or a short form piece of creative or whatever it turns out to be. And I think the most important thing in getting to great storytelling, I think there's two really important things. We are in advertising. So the first is that it has to be about the brand, right? So at the end of the day, it's actually pretty easy to do cool creative that nobody remembers what the brand is. And that doesn't work because it doesn't move the business. It doesn't drive growth. So the first thing is it has to be about the brand. The second is that it has to elicit emotion. And it doesn't always have to make you cry, but it has to make you laugh. It has to make you feel something. There has to be an emotion. And, we've evolved our testing model over time. And that's the most important driver when we think about how effective a piece of creative is going to be. It's how resonant emotionally that piece of creative is. So, those are the most important things as I'm reviewing work that stands out to me.
Working in a digital company, it's so great to hear a brand like yourself speak about that stuff, especially when it comes to platforms like YouTube, because that is super important, right? Like people are on the go, they're on smaller screens, and you have to capitalize on those moments because someone could skip that video or they could scroll past that video. And so they have to know that it was for Cheetos, as an example. So that's super important.
Exactly.
Do you have any favorite examples that you would want to share?
Yeah, I'll share one that I did with my team. I will share my favorite actual advertising campaign of all time is the Got Milk campaign. Because what I think is so brilliant about that and what we've all tried to replicate since is it is so much about the category and the brand, and it was based on such a universal insight about why and when people need the product. But then it was executed in a way that was just, I thought, brilliant. The craft of the advertising was really, really well done. The one I'll share from my portfolio was also in the days of water. And we launched, it was another new brand called Life Water, still on the market today. And it was actually launched with a mission. And the thought was, hey, we were launching a new brand. Let's use the bottles and the packaging to actually lift people's spirits. And what better way to do it than use it as a platform for art, a canvas for art? There's millions of these bottles out there. It's all over shelves. Let's actually use this as a platform for art. And that got us thinking, hey, maybe we can actually solve, some problems while we're doing it using art as a way to make the world just a little bit better. And so we developed some programming around the arts, some in education, women in arts, all different platforms around the world of art. And this is one piece that I was particularly proud of. So let's play this video.
Science, social studies, history, math, science.
Math.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Science.
Math, you have to, study every day.
Didn't take art at all.
Art wasn't necessarily a huge focus.
The last time I had an art class was in 5th grade, which was 2 years ago.
What to do.
My name is Elijah. I'm kindergarten. I do art every day. I'm really good at art. I can paint pufferfish and cows. We do less art in 2nd grade than kindergarten.
I want to be a shoe designer, but art is a side activity.
At my old school, it was very much about getting you ready for standardized tests and doing your homework and fitting you in this box, and I fully fell into that.
So 2nd grade and 1st grade, you kind of need to get serious, and kindergarten, you can pretty much be like your own self.
I wish I got better, but it feels like as I've gotten older, my art skills have kind of gone back to a 2nd grade level.
My parents were both doctors, and having a career was everything. I just think that I'm innately an artist. That part of me wasn't nurtured. It's sort of like this lost treasure. To be on this planet and not fully give of myself and my talents and my gifts, I think that would be the saddest thing.
So I got to go to this school that fully integrates art into their curriculum and just values it in general. My improvement in art has made me better at almost all of my other subjects because I'm much more interested in them.
If I had done more art and focused more on that, I think I would have progressed so much more as a scientist. You can have the facts as a scientist, but without art, you can't put it together. You're stuck. You can't move anywhere. There's no progression in science. The world would still be flat.
Are you gonna help me?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, starting with stick figures?
My teacher told me we would have art class, so I was so excited for that. I was like gonna cry.
I get really excited when brands can do good things besides just sell products. So I think that's one of the coolest things about marketing.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it stands for something, right? It's a bottle of water, but it's more than that. And you
Right.
know, there was and to your earlier point, it obviously evokes emotion, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I love that. Let's step up the conversation a little bit and talk about the complexities of marketing today, especially with the rise of digital. And obviously there's a lot happening. We talked about creative a little bit, but now we have data, we have technology, and there's just all of this like intersectionality of like, how does it all work together to actually drive impact for brands? And so I would love to hear how PepsiCo kind of integrates data and technology with the
Yeah.
creative process to enhance your strategies, because I'm assuming you guys are leaned in very heavily into all things digital to drive excellence.
Oh, totally. I think what's great is data and technology are the foundations that allow us to get our brand stories to the right people at the right time in the right way, right? And that's how we see it. We're not embracing technology for the sake of it. It is all about being as effective and efficient as we possibly can with our marketing. So, the biggest kind of investments we've made in this area are two places. One is going beyond targeting. It's not even targeting, but getting to personalization almost at scale, and doing that through building over time a very robust first-party data set, and supplementing it with some second-party data as well. You can imagine we have partners like the NFL and Google and Amazon and the NBA, and so we have a very robust, rich set of data. And we know a lot about people that shop our categories and that love our brands. And so that enables us to be able to take that creative idea and customize it in a way that we are getting the absolute right, the most relevant message and piece of creative to the right person at the right time. And what's cool too is that we also know where they shop. So we can also then overlay what the store should look like when that group of people go shopping, based on the geography and the places they shop. So it just enables us to get really relevant, even across the portfolio. So we have, $25 billion brands across snacks and beverages. And we look at our data set across all of it. It's not that here's the Gatorade data and here's the Doritos data. It's consumers that are buying, across our portfolio. And so we've gotten really smart at being able to say, okay, at this moment, this is a post-workout time. This is going to be a Gatorade message. And then, the next morning when it's time to wake up and, this person's on their phone thinking about what they're going to eat in the morning, we do a Starbucks message and so on. So that's the first way that we're really embracing data, is getting to more personalized campaigns. The second is measurement. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about measurement in a bit, but it's really hard to measure marketing. It's one of like the existential crises in our industry is, how do we make sure we can continue to invest in branding when it's really hard to measure the impact when you're not in a D2C environment, right? When you're not controlling the whole end-to-end value chain, it's difficult to really be able to tie what you do from an advertising and marketing perspective to sales. So data and technology are helping us get a lot better at that. So we're now able to look at campaigns at a much more granular level, tie media exposure to actual in-market signals in ways that we haven't done before. And we're going to continue to invest in technology platforms that allow us to do that, because if we can continue to learn, again, the goal is to be as effective and efficient as possible to drive growth. So if we're able to, you know, see how campaigns are working and learn as quickly as possible through technology, that's going to enable us to get better.
That's super interesting, because you also talked about at the very, very beginning how it's all about the human insight and finding that human insight to really lean into how do you think about the creative and the storytelling. And so you have an example of how data and technology kind of helped you shape creative direction?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things in the way we're working now, so we're evolving our model to go, you know, in the old days used to be old days. 2 years ago, we would, you know, go do like a focus group or some sort of ethnography, or go, you know, spend time with consumers, and then we would try and figure out insights that way, and then we'd go away, and you know, 4 weeks later we'd have a creative idea, and then we'd go back and we'd do a quantitative survey, and then we would adjust it. And the whole process took 6 months, right? To go from like, what's your insight, all the way to producing an ad, maybe longer, could be 6 to 12 months. Now what we're evolving to is that is all happening in real time. So we have, where we manage our, you know, our communities and our social media, we have production, we have insights, we have media, all sitting together in real time, looking at what's happening, what are we learning, how are we optimizing creative, okay, where are we placing the media, where are we amplifying organic content. And that's just something that has exponentially changed the how quickly we can learn what's working and what's not. I will say that I did bring an example. I hope you guys don't mind a few videos. I thought it would be fun to pop a few videos in, but if anybody's really not enjoying them, you can just tell me. But I have a couple more. And the one example I was going to show now is actually a new campaign. And it was created in like 10 days, from idea to in market. And it came from, it's a Pepsi idea. And it came from, we were starting to see people talking about Pepsi and pizza, and how not just that, like, hey, like people were having Pepsi with a pizza, but that there was this conversation about how like the pizza didn't taste as good when there wasn't a Pepsi with it. And there's a long standing, we have a lot of food service customers that are Pepsi, and that pour Pepsi. And so there's reasons behind that, but and there's actually scientific reason behind it that I won't bore you with. But we're like, hey, you know what? We should like tell people about this and do it in a fun way that will get people to think about Pepsi the next time they get a pizza. So let's watch this video.
We follow pizza drivers, make sure the customers get a Pepsi.
Is that legal?
That's a gray area.
Pizza guy! Pepsi guy!
Can you back off?
Yeah.
To enhance your pizza's flavor. You want to give it a taste? Boy.
Not going anywhere, pal.
30 minutes or less? That was more like a cup.
Are they usually naked?
You'd be surprised.
That's the perfect combo.
Just like us.
Yeah, he's still following me. I don't know, some kind of TikTok bullshit.
There's nothing to grab onto!
So we're trying to get to, like, that was, you know, well produced and all of that, but we're trying to do more things that you can do kind of quickly and respond to things that are happening in culture, and always do it in a way that's, you know, fun and entertaining. It'll break through.
Yeah. We actually have a question in the chat, Stacey, so I might throw
Yeah.
you a curveball.
Oh, it's fine.
How do you assess whether a brand project campaign is worth the risk? And in an event of a setback, how do you and your team approach reevaluating your strategy?
Yeah, I mean, if something, when you say, I don't know, I'm not gonna be able to clarify, I'm assuming, but I assume by risk, you're saying if there's going to be something that we don't, we haven't validated, we don't know if it's going to work. What we do is it depends on like what the level of commitment and investment is, right? So for something that typically we'll try something, we'll put it in organic or we'll put a little bit of money behind it and we'll see how it does, right? And so if something, we have KPI, we have, key performance indicators against all of our work. And if something starts to do well, then we'll invest and we'll put money behind it. So we lean into risk a fair amount if we're not putting a ton of money behind it, right? Where we won't put a ton of money where we won't do something that's really risky is when we don't have that opportunity. So let's say we're talking about a Super Bowl ad. We will research that thing to death. It will take months. We will de-risk every part of it because that's an enormous investment and we don't have the luxury of seeing how it's going to do before we put the money there. So it all depends. But now the great thing about, technology and social is that we can put things out on social media organically, put a little bit of money, and then course correct. If something isn't working, we can very quickly change it, start again, or if it does, then we boost it with media.
I think
Does that
someone
answer the
followed
question,
up.
you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think someone followed up with also the infamous Kendall Jenner commercial.
Oh,
when we think
yes.
about risk.
Oh, yeah,
and how do you prevent that from getting even worse when that did happen?
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I actually was working on brand Pepsi at that time. It came from international. We actually didn't even see it until it was on there, which is the saddest part of the whole thing. But the learning from that was especially around cultural sensitivity. So we put a lot in place after that around, we have different groups of, and resources within the company that help us assess, just cultural understanding and risk from that perspective, more than we did at that time. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes things will still come up. And so, we also have, sort of crisis management process in place if we have an issue on our hands again.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a world now, I think that was even a little bit ahead of its time, given, now the amount of influencer and creator content that, all brands are doing, the risk has actually gone up. The potential for risk has gone up. And so we do all sorts of vetting and, I think the best way to work with influencers and creatives are if they're creators, is if they're actually fans of your brand and it's much more authentic that way. But we do all the vetting, but at the end of the day, things can still get through and you can still have a problem. And so having, a crisis management plan, but also I think to my earlier point, like starting without a huge investment. And then, once you find out that something is working, then leaning it a little bit more or course correcting if it's a problem.
Yeah, and someone just asked in the chat, which I think is interesting, and we're a little off script, but thank you guys. We appreciate
By the way,
this.
are you hearing my dog barking? I'm so sorry. Okay, good. All right, keep going.
I think Elena also asked about brand loyalty and like what strategies do you employ? And I think in like the case of like the Kendall Jenner and some other brands, like because you have built brand loyalty for over time, yes, you made a mistake, but people are so loyal to the brand. And so I think having that strategy and working towards building that cohort of, consumers is really helpful.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I wasn't that close to, the exactly how that what happened after that and the steps we took. But I know the way we think about it now is, look, we're authentically trying to do the right thing for the brand and the consumers we serve. And yes, if there's a misstep, the brand and the people behind the brand are going to authentically own up to it, apologize if warranted, and course correct the best we can. Like, I do think humanizing brands is actually like the right way to create connections with people. And humans make mistakes, and some of the things that humans do are great and some things are not so great. And so, just continuing to look at it that way and do the best that we possibly can with the information we have is the best we can do.
I agree. And you mentioned this authenticity, which I love because that's super important. I mean, back to human nature, like the more authentic you are, that's just, that helps. So I
Yeah,
love that.
consistency helps with that too.
Yes. And so we've talked about creative and insights and the one thing that we're probably not going to dig in too much because I think everyone knows is like when you have a creative spot, how it looks on Facebook versus Instagram versus YouTube's different. So you're creating all these different variations to be fit for platform, which is super important. And we know PepsiCo does a great job of that. But I think that brings up the next conversation around measurement, right? Because now it's all around, cool, we're putting our creative everywhere. We're not just putting it on TV on the Super Bowl anymore and just watching sales go up. We're trying many different things. And obviously there's a lot of things traditional like metrics that I'm sure you guys are looking at. But how are you guys looking at success now? How are you looking at measuring and how are you trying to be effective to better understand like what worked and what didn't for the next campaign?
Yeah, I really do think it's the biggest challenge that we have in this industry, and in every industry is different. And if you're in a D2C environment, I think it's a little bit easier. But one of the it's funny when we first started making the big shift to digital, right? When I don't know, 10 years ago, and you talked about platforms, we were literally scorecarding against just the basics, right? 'Cause it was such a big shift to think about like what does it mean that you're only going to see the first 2 seconds of an ad or et cetera. So really the starting was like, can we even just scorecard that we are being fit for platform? That was like number one. And so we evolved all of our creative testing, which has it's a pretty good correlation with ROI. So we have models that allow us to look at our creative and test, and it generally has a pretty good it turns into in-market results pretty well. And so that's evolved big time as we've had all these different platforms. So now, we're not obviously just testing a 30-second ad, we're testing we're testing on the platform. So partners like you guys, enable us to do that. So that's one. The second is I mentioned the investment in the technology platforms that now allow us to measure campaigns at a more granular level. And so what that looks like is, as an example, what we're doing now is we have our first party consumer data. We put that in a clean room with media exposure, since we know it's the same people, the same audience that we can now target on Meta and Google and Amazon. And we can then see we have purchase data with media exposure. And so we can see if a particular household has been exposed to a piece of creative and what that exposure looks like. Did it drive sales? Did it drive conversion into the category? And so that's a really cool innovation, and I'm oversimplifying, but it's allowing us to be able to look at media exposure and actual in-market choices and correlate them together in pretty quickly, like over a couple of weeks. So not only can we look at engagement metrics, which we've always looked at, how long are people watching the videos, what are the likes, all of that stuff, but now we can actually say, hey, is exposure to this campaign actually driving sales with the people we intended it to? And that's only going to get better. Like those tools are only going to get better as technology continues to advance.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And technology is obviously advancing. Like you even said, what happened 2 years ago doesn't really hold true even today.
So fast.
Which I know we're going to talk about speed in a little bit, but I wanted to just like spend a little bit of time on like innovation, right? Because everyone here is probably thinking about, let's talk about AI, let's talk about AR, let's talk about VR. And, a lot of companies like yourself who are just so big and have spent so much money and time on building brand loyalty.
Yeah.
You want to embrace innovation, but you also want to embrace innovation responsibly. And so how is PepsiCo like embracing innovation in their marketing and media strategies?
Yeah. So I think there's different types of this type of innovation. So like when we talk about AI in particular, that's innovation that's going to help us just do the job better. So that helps us test quicker and better. It helps us create content, more real time and respond to in-market signals. And so that's an innate. I see that type of innovation as a enabler. But then there's other types of innovation like AR and VR and some of those things, which change the entire way that, you're interacting with a consumer. And, the media is different. The way that you're spending your money is different. And for that, the way that we think about it is we take about 10 to 20% of our budget, and we say we're going to do that kind of stuff. Right. So we're going to try new things, new ways of reaching consumers. It's going to potentially have a lower return. And it may not work. It's going to be something that, is unproven, but we're always going to protect that. And we're going to expect that it's not going to return the same as the other 80 to 90% of the budget, which is more in tried and true kind of media platforms. And we will never dip into that. And it depends on the brand. Some brands do 10, some brands do as high as 25, 30. But we protect it, and we protect it so that we're always we're hopefully going to find the next thing that goes into the 80%. And if we're not using that 10 to 20%, we're not going to find it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's how we think about it. And I think I have one more. I have one more video, right? The Cheetos one.
Yeah, we have a Cheetos one.
So, this will be my last example, but I think innovation, especially on brands that are trying to build penetration with a younger consumer, it's really, really important to be out there building the brand in new and modern ways. And I think the type of innovation and technology that we're talking about, and I'll introduce this one in a second, is not only a way for us to reach the consumer, but it's actually part of the story, right? It's part of the brand story that that the brand is doing disruptive, interesting, innovative things. So you'll see this particular, I'll show you a quick video. I don't think this is an ad. This is more of like the story of what this campaign was. But the whole campaign, this was when I worked on the Cheetos brand. Cheetos is about playful mischief. It's about not caring what people think and having a life that is a little bit in your face and just kind of embracing the mess. And the symbol of that mess and that mischief is the dust that's on your fingers when you eat Cheetos. We call that Cheetle. It has a name. It's in the dictionary. That was part of the campaign. And so when we think, then it was really important that we landed that we showed that as a really important brand asset, the fingertips. It's a symbol for what the brand stands for. And so we thought about, hey, is there innovation out there? Are there platforms that can enable us to, tell that story and kind of do it in a fun way that would be fresh to the category? So let's show this last video on Cheetos.
In July 2021, Cheetos, Adidas, and global megastar Bad Bunny were about to drop an exclusive fashion line. The problem? Online shopping isn't as simple as it used to be.
Retail experts say a large share of online buying is now being done by automated robots.
Automated bots. Shopping bots.
Software designed to scoop up huge amounts of popular items and resell them at higher prices.
So how could Cheetos make sure the collection fell into the hands of its true fans? Turns out the answer was right at their fingertips. Introducing Cheetle ID, the first technology that recognizes Cheetos dust, aka Cheetle, on fingertips and turns any camera of any device into a real Cheetos fan detector. We won't bore you with the countless hours of machine learning that it took to make this possible, but here's how it works. First, eat some Cheetos. Next, go to CheetleID.com and scan your hand. If no Cheetle is detected, no deal. Even if you try to cheat. But if your hands are covered in the iconic orange dust, boom. Access to the collection was granted. Making sure thousands of Cheetos fans, and only Cheetos fans, got their hands on it. Based off of the initial success, Cheetos will be rolling out Cheetle ID for future fashion collaborations, new product drops, and even exclusive access to live events, giving true Cheetos fans another reason to get their hands covered in Cheetle, and leaving the bots in our dust.
My kids say I look ridiculous in that outfit, but I still wear it sometimes.
I love it. And I think what's interesting, I mean, first of all, it's a really cool campaign, right? Like it's taking technology and like doing stuff on the back end that people may not even just be aware of, right? And it's just like leveraging it to do something really cool.
Yeah.
And when you speak about what you guys were doing with like the 10, 20, 70, or the innovation pool, whatever you guys are working through, it just reminds me of the mantra we also have at Google, which is all around fail fast, right? If you're gonna fail fast, and then just pivot and move to the next thing. And it sounds like Pepsi is very much in that same mindset. It's like, let's try it. Doesn't work, we try something new.
Put
And
your
so
money somewhere else. Yep, exactly.
yeah, and I think that leads into the next conversation around just speed, right? Because what you do 6 months ago may not even be true today. And so how important is speed with you guys and executing your strategies in this like fast-paced media environment? Because tomorrow there could be a whole new platform that you guys just never even knew about. And how do you tackle that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think maybe it's second only to measurement as how challenging it is. And the bigger the company, the harder I think it is to be really nimble and agile. And to the earlier question, like the more real time you are, the more you can open yourself up to risk, right? Because you're not going through the diligence. And so we try to find that balance. And we're picking parts of the portfolio to learn really fast. So we have a new brand, one of our newish brands is called Starry. It's a lemon lime soda. And it's still a baby brand. It's still building penetration and awareness, and it has a very, very young consumer base. And so we've chosen that brand for a number of reasons to say we are not going to plan a dollar in media. We are going to do organic social, and we are going to amplify what's working, and we're going to do it all in real time. So that has totally turned the model on its head, right? What we do with our big brands, a little more or less still today, is we plan a full year of activity, right? We say, here are the campaigns, here's what we're going to do, here are the consumers we're reaching. And we do it that way so that we do all our diligence and we plan how much we think we're going to grow based on that. And I think we need to move away from that. And so we're starting in parts of the portfolio, parts of the country, doing kind of smaller pilots to make sure that when we do change the model as much as we're talking about, the floor doesn't fall out and the whole thing, we're able to learn, we're able to establish enough confidence that when we do it on the big parts of the portfolio, we have confidence in it. But we are moving that way to be able to really plan real time, and change our allocations, change our creative as quickly as we possibly can. I think
And
the
then
only way to compete with smaller companies that the barriers to entry in our categories are much lower than they used to be. And so the way to compete is we have to figure out how to be as disruptive and agile.
Yeah, I was gonna say all those disruptor brands come in and it's very
Disrupt.
interesting. And yeah, exactly. And so Carlos brings up an interesting question that kind of dovetails into it, because obviously we're trying to go very fast, right? You're trying to stick with the market, the trends, etc.
Yeah.
But how do you maintain brand consistency? Like, how often do you need to step back and revisit, reinforce like the essence of a particular brand, like the Cheetos brand? That's a really cool concept, but I'm sure the ID may not be the overlasting. That's not the core message of the Cheeto brand. So like, how do you always take a step back and revisit this?
Yeah, well, the stronger your core idea and your core brand is, the easier it is to get to innovation and more interesting ideas. So, I think Cheetos is a great example that, the core idea isn't Cheeto ID, but the core idea is, get Cheeto on your hand, because it is going to make life a lot more fun. And it like that is an important, that was an important asset because it is so symbolic. And so, we were never going to do a program that didn't somehow reinforce an important part of the brand, an important part of the brand's story. And the risk is really where you have a brand that doesn't have distinctive assets, that isn't famous for things, because then I think you can overcorrect on doing things that might be relevant but aren't in service of building your brand. So to answer the question on how we operate, on how we do that and we operate that, we actually do periodic reviews. We were doing them twice a year. I'm actually going to try and do them more often, where we take a step back and we look at everything out there, not only what we've created, but what consumers have created, what partners have created. And if it is starting to get off the rails, we talk about, hey, what do we need to do to change our approach so that all of this content is actually in service of something bigger? Because it does. I am a big believer that, we should follow relevance, and we should be flexible about how, we're reaching our consumers and how we're telling the timely stories. But the timeless part, like what your brand is about at the highest order, needs to always be protected.
I mean, that's interesting. And the one thing we haven't really talked about is just the differences in your target audience, right? And I think it's happened. Two people asked it, and I've been saving it for here, but you've built loyalty for so many generations, but now you have this new generation called Gen Z, and you're trying to reach them in a very different way than you've reached other people. And so how do you think about how your core message really translates across all these different generations, especially the younger ones?
Yeah, well, two ways. One, we actually manage it within the portfolio first. So there are some brands that are for everyone, and I'll come back to that. But then there are some brands that are specifically targeted at different groups. And so, that we do have brands that skew much younger. They're more permissible for a whole variety of reasons. And therefore, we are building them for Gen Z, some even Gen Alpha. And so our media plan, our messaging, our tonality, all of that is geared for Gen Z. And hey, it's okay if millennials and Xers don't understand it, because the brands are not for them. So that's the portfolio part, that we're actually, building brands for different cohorts to a certain extent and managing across the portfolio.
Yeah.
But there are brands, like think about Gatorade as an example, that is so big, and so ubiquitous, it does have to reach multiple cohorts. And so the way that we do that is, we even within either the product portfolio of offerings, but then also within how we think about our different campaigns and the intention of each message that we have for the consumer, those are targeted differently by cohort as well. So even though Gatorade will always be about performance and about reaching potential, that is what the core of that brand will always be about. The way that comes to a teen athlete through the people that are influential in their lives, through grassroots experiences, through custom hydration made solely for them in their biology, that's going to look very differently than someone who has grown up for the brand for the last 40 years. It'll be about the same thing, but it'll be relevant to them in a different way.
Yep. I agree. That's actually interesting with the whole portfolio play as well. Not trying to push every brand on everyone.
Right.
Everything has a place in the puzzle for PepsiCo, which is cool.
Yeah.
Given the need for speed, what advice would you give to students and new professionals they obviously want to be fast and they want to do great things in their job, but also just maintain the quality of their work? Like, where's the balance? And how do you, as a senior leader, do that with your teams?
Yeah. I think it's all about the way that, I think about managing our own portfolio and where we spend resources, and how I think about managing my time, and I coach the team to manage their time the same way, which is think about the most important things that are going to have the biggest consequences or have the most impact or influence. And those things you might want to take a little bit more time, get them 100% right, take a little bit less risk, versus some of the things that maybe, either you fly under the radar, or, you can take a flyer on something, or you can take a big risk because nobody's really watching as much in your career. Like, those are the places where go all in, try something, course correct if it's not working. But it's, for me, as you guys start your careers and you get more and more senior, it's impossible to do everything and to manage, everything on your plate. So being really thoughtful about what are the most important things for you to deliver for your organization, the business, yourself, and then how to use your own resources, your own time against those. I think that's a really important skill to develop, and spending time and I actually use a tool. It's actually from Franklin Covey, which is like an HR consultant, but I plot everything I have on my to-do list against a quadrant of urgency and importance. And, you know, it's one axis is urgency, one axis is importance. And I look at it and I look at it with my team, and we make choices about how much time we're going to spend on something, where we're going to test, where we're not going to test, where we're going to invest, where we're not going to invest, based on where things fall in those quadrants. So I would encourage you to start thinking about that even early in your career.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it'd be interesting, and Stacy brings up a good question for this crew, is PepsiCo is like many other big global companies, just very complex, right? And when people talk about advertising, it's not just one thing, right? You have multiple departments at PepsiCo
Yes.
that feed into it. And so organizationally, like, does advertising, social media, like all marketing department, do that report directly into one area of PepsiCo? How are you guys structured, and how do you guys all kind of work side by side?
Yeah. So yeah, we have a CEO that runs North America, and under the CEO is a chief marketing officer that has all the marketing activity in the whole portfolio. And underneath that, there's categories. So there's category and brand teams. So if you're on the Mountain Dew team, you're responsible for all advertising, all social media. You're responsible for the commercial plans. You're responsible for the end-to-end management of your brand. But then we also have specialist groups that also report into the marketing to our CMO, and what those specialist groups do. And so a lot of those groups report to me. So I have media and content and innovation and capabilities and transformation and sports and all the functions that require a little bit more expertise, and that cross the entire portfolio. And so it is a little bit of a matrix, but I think you kind of need that, because from a skill set perspective, you know, we want to have sort of, we call it generalist marketers, who are able to take a brand or a portfolio and think through how to grow that brand and portfolio, how to build the brand ideas, how to manage the P&L, the whole end-to-end thing. But then we also need people that know like digital media inside and out, that understand performance marketing, that are expert negotiators in sports contracts. Like those are some specialized fields that we need both, right? And the cool thing about working at a big marketing organization like PepsiCo is that I mentioned before, we kind of rotate through them. And so you learn everything. So by the time you're old like me and you've had, a 17-year career, I've done all of it. And I think that makes me a pretty well-rounded marketer.
Yeah, I agree. Moving around a little bit in your career, especially early on, really helps build those skills. And I think someone had a question earlier, which I'm going to couple with Stacy's, is if someone's looking to get into brand management, like what's the typical path? And then coupled with, what are some key skills and strategies that you would recommend focusing on?
Yeah. I think it's a really nice I'll start with the second and then I'll come back. So I think it's a really nice intersection of a little bit of like, there's four things. So there's a left brain, right brain, balance. So you really need to be analytical and creative if you want to be in brand management. And that was one of the things that I love. That's one of the things I love most about the role, is that I can geek out on the numbers and get deep into the P&L. I love that. And then, I can also go and develop a beautiful film with a creative person. And I think that's great. So if you love that and that's interesting to you and you like bouncing between two, this is a good path. And then the other two, equally important, is strategy. And so I mentioned being choiceful, but making big decisions on how to grow a brand or a portfolio for the long term, that's really important in this field. And then the last is leadership. So even as someone who comes in as an associate brand manager right out of school, you're going to be leading a big cross-functional team. You're going to be project managing. You're going to be working within a matrix. And so, having a real sense of how to collaborate, influence others, inspire people, those are probably the most important skills that we'd be looking for. And the first part of that question was what? Remind me again, Brian.
Like, what's typical path to get into brand management?
Yeah. I don't think there is a typical path anymore, especially so we recruit people a few ways: out of undergraduate, out of MBA. They start at slightly different places in the organization, but both are important. And then experienced hires, either from other CPG industries, or from any type of sort of marketing field. And so where you come into the organization probably varies a little bit based on where your path is. So let's say you start out in a media agency, or as a digital marketing expert. Well, then you decide you want to go into brand management. Well, you might come in to PepsiCo or P&G or somewhere through the media team because you're a specialist. But then once you're in the organization, then that allows you to then transition into all sorts of different roles. Whereas if you start right out of your MBA or your master's degree, maybe in this case, you'd come in more of a traditional like entry-level associate brand manager role and build your way from there.
Love it. We have some time left, and I wanted to open the forum to anyone that wants to raise their hand, come off mute, ask a question to Stacy. She's, as you guys seen, she's an open book. So anyone have any questions? And if you're too shy, you can type in the chat
nobody
too.
asks any questions. Did we
We
get
don't
to
really
all?
have any more time left, so I think we're at the hour mark actually. But I think we got to all the questions in the chat, which is great. So I guess with that, Stacy, thank you. Thank you so much.
You.
I'll pass it back over to Stacy to close it out, but really appreciate your time and really appreciate your openness to all the students here.
Thanks everybody for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, both of you, for leading this so adeptly, Bryan, and including when I lobbed you with a really big, meaty question right at the end. I apologize for that. And Stacy, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for enlightening all of our students. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us tonight. Specifically, if anyone here is not already part of our digital marketing community of alumni or students, we would invite you, if you'd like to learn more information about us. We have our next information session online on Friday, October 18th at noon Eastern time, which you can register for right from our website. And I hope to see you soon, if not there, somewhere else. And thank you again to our speaker and moderator. And everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.